matter. And I believe it's not just the Bill of Rights here, but a lot of parts of the history and Constitution. So there's a warning in his book. It says, warning, you might learn something here. So our next speaker is a devoted constitutionalist, and he has served in numerous organizations as well as in government, and always arguing for our constitutional rights. He has spent his life in the study of our founding documents and the political theory which surrounds it. And as a public speaker, he has defended the Republic, arguing for the original intent of our founders. And this is the second installment to try to simplify and make our Constitution more understandable to the American public. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you our next speaker, author of the book Our Founders and Their Words and Why They Matter, Mr. Russell Rucker. A round of applause.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here in Sandiego. It's quite a ways from home. I'm half a continent away. And I'm glad that Reader's Magazine gave me an opportunity to speak today. I started in this journey, I'd say, I picked up a book quite a while back, about 40 years ago, and it was about the Miracle in Philadelphia, it was called. And it was a historian that wrote the text describing what had occurred in 1787 at the convention. And I was really quite intrigued with that. And I started doing a lot of studying on it, and I started reading things like Common Sense and the letters from a farmer in Philadelphia. And I learned how to read Old English and to study it. And I was really just fascinated with what they were able to accomplish. And a few years ago, I got quite irritated, really, at the level of people telling me things that were in there that weren't in there. People in newspapers that should know what they're talking about. And even people on talk shows telling me on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, things that were incorrect. So I decided I was going to go back through the records of the convention, and I was going to reread the whole thing, and I was going to write up and explain what the heck it meant and what it was there. So I wrote this first installment, which is textualism and originalism in our constitutional republic, and that came out about a year ago. And I decided that I hadn't said enough. So I decided to write another book, not just to explain what exactly it said, but how we got to that point. You know, the plans in the convention that were brought in. So I rewrote them a little bit to make them a little better understanding for the American people. After all, there isn't an exact science in the records because the people that kept notes were taking it in real time. So you have 8 or 10 different people keeping notes in the convention. So it's disputable which one was exactly correct. It's kind of like having the 4 Gospels in the Bible, and you get 4 different views of what occurred. So I went through it, and I tried the best I could to reword it just a little bit, not change it, but just to make it better understandable. And I put all 3 of the plans in the new book. The Pinckney Plan, which was by Charles Pinckney. He's known as Constitutional Charlie. He spoke on almost everything in the convention. And then we had the Virginia Plan, which is basically what they wound up working off of. Okay, that was a plan written by James Madison. And he studied in his upper room in his plantation, in his estate. It's a vast overlook, probably a quarter mile down there. I have been there. It's a fascinating place. And he studied every possible form of government, of self-government he could find, because he was trying to get the best government for us that we could with the highest amount of freedom and liberty that could possibly be. And of course, when you have states setting up a constitutional convention, everyone has to give up something. So liberty and freedom are given up to some extent to the federal government in order to have a federal government in order to protect the states. So you have to give up something, or you won't have a national or federal government like we have today. So, and then you get halfway through the convention, and you have Randolph, no, I'm sorry, it's not Randolph, Patterson, and he brings forward the New Jersey plan because he's not happy with any of the plans. Frankly, they're disgusted with what's going on. The original purpose was to update the Articles of Confederation, not write a whole new document. And so Pinckney and Patterson were trying to work within the framework of the Articles of Confederation, within the framework that Congress, the Continental Congress, had sent them to. And so I'm trying to explain exactly what happened and why they did what they did, why they chose the one over the other. And my book starts out talking about the different holidays that are from our founding, which are the 4th of July, Washington's birthday, and Thanksgiving. Those are the only 3 holidays that really are in the very beginning. And of course, Washington's birthday has been relegated to President's Day today. But as you get through it, and the whole idea that this is not a religious country, it's just, when you read the speeches and the documentation that Washington cites when he proclaims the national holiday, it's just clearly that's what it is. It's giving thanks to God Almighty for everything they have, including their liberty, their government, all of it. So these holidays are important. I know it's been relegated down to sitting around the table eating turkey, watching football afterwards, having a good time. But at some point, especially Madison was asking not for a feast, but they were asking for a fasting, a day of reflection and public thanksgiving to God for what they had. And they weren't really supposed to be having this grand celebration like they had when the Pilgrims first started. They were having a big harvest feast. So it's different that way. And then I get into, the war itself, what is occurring that brought us to it. Samuel Adams was bent on having a revolution. He didn't just ferment malt liquor. He fermented a revolution. He tried every way he could to cause trouble to bring about a revolution. So I discussed that, and I discussed the first administration, Washington's administration, the feud between Hamilton and Jefferson that wound up leading Jefferson to even leave the administration. And then he formed his own party to counter what Hamilton was doing. Hamilton was trying to set up a national bank, a national road network, and he was trying to build this federal government. Jeffersonian Republicans were trying, they wanted a smaller government, but in the end, they wound up taking control of the government, and they made it bigger than the Federalists ever wanted. So I tried to get through all this, and when you talk about the Declaration, it's quite different what they started with. When Franklin and Jefferson and Livingston, there were 5 of them on the committee, and they started talking about it. It's quite a different document. So I decided I'm going to use that original document before it was altered. So I've written the entire document out and numbered all the different points of complaints. One of the most interesting complaints that I found was a complaint that England had forced slavery on the colonies. And I'm like, wow, I never heard this before. I'm reading this, and this is just fascinating stuff, So I thought it was really interesting, and I thought, that would be something people might be interested in, the differences that are in there. And it's not just that different. There's a lot of subtle differences. And the same goes with our Bill of Rights. Our Bill of Rights came to be because those in the convention didn't believe we needed a Bill of Rights. They thought it was spread out throughout the whole document. But when they got to the state ratifying conventions, the states started complaining that, hey, we're giving up natural rights here, and we're getting no guarantees for giving up these natural rights. So there were quite a few states that didn't want to sign on to it. In fact, North Carolina voted the Constitution down. They had to have a new ratifying convention the next year. But what Madison did was he wrote up a Bill of Rights from the complaints of all the different conventions. And he submitted all these. He started with 19 articles. And some of them are kind of interesting because there's like freedom of religion is in there. And it talks about that you can't be forced to serve in the military there. Of course, that didn't make it. But that's one of the original things. It gives you an idea of what they were thinking about at the time and why they did what they did. And he produced this upon a promise in the first election for Congress. He was running against James Monroe. And he made a promise that I will use the amendment process to get a Bill of Rights through if I'm elected. And he won his seat, and he worked on doing this. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy because it was the first Congress. Washington had just been installed as President of the United States, and they had a lot more important things to do than working on a Bill of Rights. They were trying to set up the government itself. They were trying to get the federal government up and working, and they just really didn't have time to deal with this. But he kept pushing it and pushing it, and out of the House came 17 amendments. And that's the what I use in my book as an early edition of the Bill of Rights. It gives you a better idea. So it's a little different than what you're used to hearing. And you came out with, then of course out of the Senate, you came out with 12. And of those 12, 10 got passed, and the last 10. The first one got passed as the 27th Amendment. It finally went through. There's actually one of the Bill of Rights still out there. And it's live because they didn't put an end date on it like the more modern amendments had. So it could still be passed. It has to do with the numbers in Congress. So if it were to pass, we would have a lot more House of Representatives is what it amounts to. Okay. There's just a lot of interesting things, and a grand compromise giving the state and the Senate to represent the states and the House to represent the people. That was a big conflict. They argued for months trying to get that settled. So that's just kind of an interesting thing. I would like to read a little bit. I'm running out of time here. And this is out of my chapter on Thomas Paine. Paine was a radical for sure, and some of his work banned in England, and was tried in abstention after he fled to France. Let us not forget, all of our founders were radicals of their day. His most important work, Common Sense, galvanized the colonies when it came out in 1776 in January and helped turn the tide of public opinion towards independence. In it, he argues the importance of self-government, the strives being the first in any land having to carve out an existence in the forest to survive, and the importance of working together to help self-government. He states that society any state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is a necessary evil. You know, in retrospect, it was interesting when I first read it. I don't think I really understood its context, but I sure see its reality now. And then he describes, you know, just the lumber we have and what it would take to build a navy and the size of the small country that's governing us, the island, England, that's governing over us, and discusses that a king has to be looked after, and we're asked to give the final balance of life to defend what they won't tell us why they're doing to begin with. So it's really interesting. But I come to the end of my time. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say. I'm just really passionate about this, and thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Do we have questions for for Russell? Anyone?
What was the most interesting or surprising fact that you found out during your research?
Well, I think it was some of the discussions over slavery and some of the arguments against it were just fascinating. I can't remember who it was, but one of the arguments was actually talking. See, they were arguing over slavery as property, and is it property? And if it's property, then why are we not counting the cows? Why aren't we counting the pigs? Why are we not counting all the buildings we have up north here where we don't have slavery? And as we proceed down to the south, and he describes what's happening down south, and as a further south you get, how much worse it gets. And then you cannot be both slave and property. Man and property at the same time. And you say if it's property, that's one thing. But if it's people, then you need to give them the right to vote and give them citizenship. So there was a lot of these kind of arguments that I found just fascinating in there.
I love the Constitution. For me, it's a living document that, for over 200 years have expanded our rights as people. Slavery is a perfect example. Lincoln wrote, some people say that President Lincoln freed the slaves for winter war. But prior to that, when he was a senator, I think one of his greatest articles was a house divided, where he quoted Jesus Christ as saying, a house divided cannot stand. We cannot have slave states and free states because of the Missouri Compromise that was being argued against. Now, recently, the Supreme Court, to me, has ignored that whole concept, saying that let the states decide abortion. We can have states with abortion and states without abortion. To me, it's the same example as slavery. Do you think that will lead to or can lead to a constitutional crisis?
I don't think it's going to lead to a constitutional crisis because I think the states in their 50 laboratories will figure out what to do. I think eventually you're going to have to come across some kind of compromise. The thing about that decision, that I always thought, it's not in the Constitution. There's too much of this stuff that isn't in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court has just taken over these things that aren't in and giving an opinion on something when I think they should be following the text and the original thought. The thing is, those things should be at the state level. If it's not mentioned under Article 10, unless we're going to go to 9, which it is possible that it could be a natural right, and natural law is in the 9th. So it's possible if you made that argument. I haven't really heard it, but I kind of wonder about that. Okay, could it be argued that it's a woman's natural right? I don't know, but if you can't make that connection, then it has to go to the states, because if it's not here in the Constitution, it's not for the federal government, then it's reserved to the states and to the people. So it comes down to that. It's a tough issue. I don't know what to think, but I don't think we're going to have a constitutional crisis over it. I think the people and the legislatures in the end will make some kind of compromise somewhere. At least I'm hoping so.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. The author of the book, Our Founders and the Words and Why They Matter, Mr. Russell Rucker.